Josh Smith was once one of the most promising two-way players in the NBA. An extremely fast, athletic, and strong wing, he would throw down some of the most vicious dunks on one end and then pull off some of the most brutal blocks on the other. But Josh Smith never managed to capture his full potential and would never make an All-Star or even an All-NBA team, despite being one of the most talented players in the NBA. Then, he was waived entirely by the Detroit Pistons in one of the biggest salary cap absorptions in league history. And now he finds himself playing in China, leaving many fans wondering just what happened to Josh Smith's NBA career. This video will answer that question by providing a history of Josh Smith's time in the league before going over what led to him being pushed out of the NBA. Josh Smith was one of the last few players to make the jump straight out of high school to the NBA. Smith had begun his high school career playing alongside Dwight Howard, but transferred to Oak Hill to play his senior season alongside Rajon Rondo. The two incredible players destined for the NBA would dominate some poor high school competition and win all 38 games of their season. J Smooth would have one of the most absurd stat lines I've ever seen in high school, averaging 22 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 blocks, and 3 steals a game. These numbers are simply absurd and showed how athletic he was, simply dominating opposition teams on both ends of the court. Josh was originally committed to the Indiana University as the third highest ranked player in the entire country, but he would forego his college eligibility and immediately head to the league. He would be picked 17th in the draft by the Atlanta Hawks and immediately made an impact on the team. Starting in 59 games in his rookie year, he averaged 9.7 points, 6.2 rebounds, and an incredible 1.95 blocks per game in just his rookie season, making the All-NBA second team as he went along with it. The defensive impact he had through his athleticism and effort was incredible, as he averaged almost 1 steal a game and showed the impact he would have throughout his NBA career. Smith would go on to become the youngest player to ever reach 500 and 1,000 blocks respectively, and in just his third season he would average 16.4 points, 8.6 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals, and an absurd 2.9 blocks from the small forward position. After this third season in the league, people expected Smith to continue to develop into one of the best players at his position in the NBA. He had shown some ability to knock down threes, had a good handle, was a great rebounder, super athletic, and was an amazing defender. GMs, fans, and journalists all thought that Smith would become an All-Star and lead the Atlanta Hawks to serious playoff runs. Over his first 3 years with the Hawks, Smith would find himself joined by other high picks in Marvin Williams and Al Horford. Initially, Williams played the 4 and Smith played the 3, but with the arrival of Al, they moved Smith to the power forward so that he could play closer to the basket and help make up for that undersized center. With this move, Josh Smith was signaling the beginning of the modern NBA trend of small ball, and athletic power forwards who could pass the ball, guard the perimeter, and even knock down threes. In many ways, he was a more athletic Draymond Green in the early days of his Atlanta Hawks career. But the biggest difference, and what would be one of the biggest problems in his career, is that he never managed to develop his three-point stroke more than when he entered the league. He continued to take 1 to 2 attempts per season and would shoot around 25 to 30%, just absolutely abhorrent numbers. Many fans felt that if he worked exceptionally hard on his shooting and got it up to around 36%, or just simply stopped shooting threes, he would be a much better player. Then, in the 2009-2010 NBA season, Smith came out to play basketball and didn't attempt any threes unless it was a late in the shot clock or a half-court heave. As a result, he played closer to the basket, increased his presence on the offensive glass, and went back to being an exceptionally high-effort defensive player. He would average 15.7 points, 8.7 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.6 steals, and 2.1 blocks a game, all while shooting over 50% from the field for the first and only time in his career. Many felt Smith had turned the corner and would become an all-star as he developed his back-to-basket game, face-up game, and had more energy to focus on defense and rebounding. However, in the next season, he went straight back to shooting threes and more than ever before. But in this lone season, he managed to shoot 33%. Not a great clip, but the best of his career thus far, and as high as he would ever get it. The three-point shooting would continue, and Atlanta's patience would wane thin with their young player. In the 2013 offseason, Smith would depart Atlanta, signing with the Detroit Pistons for $54 million over 4 years. But the Pistons had Andre Drummond and Greg Monroe already, and planned on playing Josh back at the small forward. Everyone from the outside could see the disaster waiting to happen. The Pistons had no shooting, Drummond and Monroe were young and below average defenders, and Smith was being forced to play out of his natural position at the 4. And the moment he signed with the Pistons was the downfall of his NBA career. Smith and the Pistons struggled almost immediately, as they never played to Josh's strengths of getting out in transition and allowing him to play close to the basket. Smith shot the worst true shooting percentage of his career, took more threes than ever, and his defensive impact waned. The following year, the Pistons would be taken over by Stan Van Gundy, and after starting even worse than the year before by going 5-23 combined, with J Smooth having his worst career numbers, the Pistons completely waived Josh Smith. They didn't even try and trade him according to the news at the time, and simply opted to pay his salary over the next 6 years. In fact, they will still be paying him $5.4 million a season for the next 2 seasons. And immediately after waiving him, the Pistons turned their season around. They went on a strong run and went 27-27 over the remaining games of the year. Sure, this isn't a huge improvement and they didn't make the playoffs, but considering they got no value in return for Smith and kept the same roster, it wasn't a good sign for Josh Smith's future as a main piece on an NBA team. No advanced stats or eye test can show as much as what happens on the court and in the results column, and every NBA GM would have taken notice of how much better the Detroit Pistons became after he left. Smith would see the last of his true NBA success when he immediately signed with the Houston Rockets after being waived by the Pistons. Here he would team up with the young James Harden and his old school pal Dwight Howard. Here, he would embrace a bench role and average 12 points, 6 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 1 steal and 1 block per game. The high-paced system of Houston and being surrounded by shooters and an athletic center suited Smith. He came up absolutely huge in the playoffs for the Rockets in the 2015 season, dominating Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavericks by getting into the paint and throwing lobs to Dwight Howard and finishing at the rim, but then his minutes were reduced against the Clippers and they found themselves down 3-1. Kevin McHale inserted him back to his regular minutes, and the Rockets pulled off one of the biggest upsets to come back from 3-1 down and win the series. Sure, the Rockets would end up getting destroyed by the Warriors, but I remember thinking that Smith would have earned himself a new contract in the NBA with his great playoff play. But he would only get a 1-year deal with the Clippers before getting traded back to the Rockets once again, but playing about at half as well in this second stint. Following this ultimate failure, Smith found himself playing in China and then finally in Israel, trying to claw his way back to the NBA, which he did, for just 3 games for the Pelicans before being cut and out of the league for good. So how did such an athlete who could defend, rebound, and pass find himself out of the league? It comes down to a concept I discussed in an earlier video: selfishness and a lack of self-awareness. In the NBA, there are 30 teams, and each team will have enough shots to give 2 stars around 18 shots a game, and maybe one more player around 15 to 16 shots. This comes from the idea that there are only so many shots that you get in an NBA game, and coaches and front offices are trying to figure out how to maximize the value of each possession. For example, say you have Kyrie Irving on your team and a roster full of average NBA players. You ideally want Kyrie Irving to drive the ball and create for himself, or find an open shot for his teammates for the first few possessions of the game. But when defenses start locking in on that player or they get tired, the percentages of the effectiveness of Kyrie Irving doing that change. Maybe the ball should now go to the next best player if Kyrie is getting hard trapped and is just created on 7 possessions in a row. So teams distribute shots to players and stagger them. To ensure fatigue doesn't affect the shots, players stay in rhythm, all in an attempt to maximize the efficiency of each possession. And this is where players like Smith are so harmful. When he takes a 3-pointer, his coach must have an aneurysm. At a career shooting rate of below 30%, the expected value of every single attempt is simply so much lower than running a simple pick and roll with average players. And it appeared that no matter how well he was coached, that he would still attempt threes, take step-back 2-pointers, and take shots over star players such as Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and James Harden. This makes him a liability when you put him on the court, and I think coaches simply wore thin of this and simply requested their teams not to pick him up. Say Smith had continued from his season of not shooting threes, focused on making lobs, getting out in transition, creating for his teammates and playing defense, he would probably still be getting paid the big money in the NBA. He would be the perfect small ball center for a team that wanted to get out and run for some stretch of the game. Instead, he is struggling to find an NBA roster and playing in China or not at all because he couldn't stop shooting threes. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more NBA videos in the future, and let me know in the comments below what you think of Josh Smith and his NBA career.